Hello guys, and welcome back to Venice. In the last episode, we built pretty much the entire port area, and in this episode, I'd like to build the first city block, right next to the train station. Some of these canals in this area are wider than others, and to achieve those wide ones, I use the terraforming network within game. That's the first thing I want to do. Next thing is to try and work out where the pedestrian pathways are on Google Earth. I've decided I'm going to put those pedestrian pathways down first to give a sort of a loose grid as to where to put the buildings. Of course, this part would be really easy in a conventional city, if you will. The buildings will just follow the roads. And I just didn't think it would be a good idea to just guess where these buildings are going to go. They sort of need some sort of framework to follow. I'd imagine if I put the buildings down freeform style, I'd get halfway through a block and realise that I'd put them in the wrong place, or there was too much room on this side of the block and not enough on that side, etc. And also, I'm going to need those pedestrian paths to make the city function within the game as well, so it's sort of two birds with one stone here. Now when it comes to placing the buildings in, I have to use procedural objects on the buildings directly above the water as to remove the terrain from underneath them. This is going to allow me to make it look like the buildings are going directly into the Grand Canal. One thing I also noted was the density of these buildings got really extreme the closer it got to the Grand Canal. So we see heavy density right on its shores. Now, I have to admit that these buildings are not going to match perfectly, and I think that's fine because they're most definitely close enough. I am, however, using procedural objects on some of the more recognisable landmarks to get them as close as I can to that real-life model. So after being a little burnt out from my last project, I've decided to take on an even bigger one where I have to place in thousands of buildings. So if that's not irony at its finest, I really don't know what is. But it's okay because I was fully prepared for this to be the case. And although being a rather tedious task and taking a fair amount of time, it's actually quite enjoyable. So you can see here why I've decided to put those pedestrian pathways down first. You can see the density around some of them is really high, and I'm focusing the buildings around those particular areas. We also see a couple of plazas or open town squares here as well, and there's quite a large bushy park area in this block as well. So without detailing that block any further, I want to use that exact method and fill out the rest of it. Once I've got 99% of these buildings down, we'll come back and do all the detailing. You guys may also notice how quickly I get these buildings down, and I do apologise to those of you who want to see maybe a more in-depth video of me placing those buildings. But if I realistically want to get Venice completed before City Skylines 2 comes out, I really need to get a hustle on, and I very much want to complete this project 100%. I started to get pretty excited at this point. That looks much more like the Venice we all know and love. So now let's zoom in, not waste any more time, and start detailing a little closer. I'm using a block key from Epic Lurker, I think it's from his Dutch pack, to form the edge of the canal for no other reason other than it looks really realistic. It's got sort of a grungy look to it. The only thing that I need to change is the surface on top, so I use some surface networks, and this is so that we can put our own decals on here. Some places are going to have a nice cobblestone, others are going to have more damaged areas, and I also add pedestrian pathways through this area. Of course, this is where we're going to have most of the foot traffic, and that's also the reason why I want to show a little bit more damage in some of these areas. I'll top it off with some props like boats and tables. There's a couple of reasons why I've decided to keep the detailing here on these inner blocks pretty simple. Number one is they're going to be nowhere near as visible as, say, the canals, which is where I'm planning on detailing the most. And number two, being realistic, if I'm going to detail every single section of the city, my computer is going to melt. I kind of figured that the pedestrians moving through these areas with some simple detailing like planters and decals here and there would be enough. You can also see here that we've got one of our little wee hidden service roads. This is the area where I'm going to wind all of the spawn points to from all of these functioning buildings in this block. If you didn't catch the last episode, these areas are going to be where the rubbish trucks etc. can come and do their thing, while it will only be the pedestrians using the pedestrian pathways to walk to their homes, which is an essential function to making this city work. So to finish off most of this inner block, I'll just put things down like concrete slabs and those planters and trees we spoke about, and some of the buildings need a little bit of adjusting also, and I'll put a few of Ronick 69 stain decals on the ground as well. There also looks to be a graveyard or something of the sort in this area, so I put one of those in as well with procedural objects and just a random piece of concrete. Once all of this inner block is all finished, we're going to spend a fair amount of time detailing things like town squares and those canal fronts. One of the things that makes Venice really famous is the beautifully bright coloured pastel buildings. Unfortunately, not all the buildings within game have changeable facade colours, but for the ones that do, I'm going for sort of yellows and oranges and pinks and all of those sort of in neutral or natural tones. And straight away, it's just got so much more character than that bland sort of a brown colour they were. I have to be careful, however, changing the colour of the building can sometimes change the colour of the roof as well, and I need to avoid that. I'd like to keep all the roofs terracotta. I would really like these town squares to be hustling and bustling, full of citizens, lots of things happening and going on, hence why we're going to put lots of detail into these areas, as simple as they are. We see lots and lots of restaurants and coffee shops surrounding these types of squares, which is why I'm going to put some entertainment cubes in here eventually so that we get lots of citizens hanging out. In terms of props, I really want to make it look like restaurants here, even though they may not be them within game. So we're going to see lots of tables, and I'll put some prop people down on them so they look full. We've got awnings, we've got shop fronts, there's also menu boards. I've also got some little decorative planters around the place. And there's also this really cool feature in Venice. There's lots of wells and stuff all over the place to try and control the flooding. So I've put a prop well in as well. And that's definitely going to be a reoccurring theme. We're going to see lots of those wells all over the city. As we make our way through our first block we've built, you're going to see things like markets selling things, there's more coffee shops, there's souvenir shops. There's also a significant amount of damage on the ground here because of the foot traffic. I think you guys will agree with the people walking through here, it just really tops it off. It's quite magical how they bring it all to life. So here I'm finally working on the side of the Grand Canal, and this is, like I've been saying, where we're going to put most of the detail. I imagine the technique that I'm using here is probably the technique I'm going to use throughout the city, so I take my time here to make sure it all works and sort of lock in a way that I'm going to do it. One thing you guys may have noticed is I haven't got my canals as low to the water as I would like. The whole city's probably up about a metre more than it should be. This is purely because if I make it lower, the water physics within the game are terrible. It floods the city, things don't work properly, so unfortunately the majority of the buildings have to sit up a little bit, but what I'm trying to do here is make the buildings directly on the edge of the Grand Canal appear lower down. So I use procedural objects to just move them down closer to the water a little bit. Being procedural objects, it means that the functionality of the buildings is taken away, so they can't flood. So using Epic Lurker's key once again here in combination with the buildings, I'll just move them down to pretty much as low to the water as I can get them. Then I'll spend a little bit more time moving these buildings around for the third time and sort of putting them into more tight-knit blocks, and then changing the facade colour to those more bright colours. Eventually I'm going to have pedestrian pathways bring in real citizens down through this area, so I'm going to spend some time putting stairs in where I need to, and also making sure that there's proper access along these quays for the citizens to move. To generate their movement through this area, I'm also going to put down some shops, and I'm going to do my best not to turn these to procedural objects because I want them to actually function as a commercial area within game. Some of the ones that I put directly over the water might have to be changed to procedural objects, but other than that, I'm going to try and keep them functioning. I think one of the most exciting prospects about doing all the detailing on the edge of the Grand Canal for me is the fact that there's also lots of old abandoned infrastructure, namely old piers that just look like they are no longer used. This mixed with all the restaurants and the beautiful flower boxes on the fences, those really contrasting areas are some of my favourite to build. These restaurants here that I'm building in real life look massive, or at the very least larger than the average size one in Venice, and I would say that's purely because of the location. These will be sought after restaurants that will fill out most of the tables that'll be available. So we see lots of tables here, they're all pretty much full, and another iconic thing about this restaurant is the amount of awnings over it. There is so many. I mean, I don't know if it's iconic, but I definitely noticed it on Google Earth. So the tables, the awnings, and probably the fences, the white fences with the flower boxes on them, are the most prominent props you're going to see me place down. So here's the first section of buildings that are going to run directly into the Grand Canal. The entire city is made up of a combination of these areas as well as those keyed areas we made earlier. These buildings here that run directly into the water just have a very simple entry and exit point down at that water height. Most of the time it's a very small pier, but at the very least there seems to be at least some sort of a concrete footing outside of the door. There's also areas where walkways come right down to the edge of the canal, and there's little wee piers and stairs coming out at these areas. I'm really pleased with how this area came out. It looks really cool with the buildings going straight into the water, and it's given me a lot of hope for the future of the city as well. I think it's going to come out really good. I put these buildings down here next to the train station very quickly in the last episode, and now I want to spend a little bit of time putting these in more accurately. In fact, we're going to finish the entire canal edge round the train station here, and that's why I'd like to get these buildings right before we do anything else. Because of the unique shape of this building, I've had to just use one with procedural objects and use it multiple times to try and create that shape. It's certainly not perfect, but I think it comes out pretty good. There's a pretty unique shape to the edge of the canal right out front of this building. It looks like there might be ferries or something that launch from this area, but in any case I want to get this as accurate as I can. I've also used procedural objects on one part of the building to lift it off the ground about 8 feet. I'm going to have the pedestrians walk underneath this building, almost like the ground floor is completely open and just being held up with pillars. The area inside this building closest to the train station is pretty much just a car park, and I finished the area off with a nice cobblestone decal on the ground. Where this building meets the other side of the canal, it just looks like a lot of piers for boats and a little wee green park. This next bit here looks to me to be some sort of a train yard. Maybe this is where they can perform some maintenance or something like that, but it also has access off of the highway. And I had to look pretty close at Google Earth to see this little road, but this also explains how the vehicles get up and near the train station and into that car park. This area is going to look pretty rugged. It's going to look damaged and a little bit overgrown. I'm hoping this adds to the realism. If anyone is interested in any little sneaky pics before they're released as a video, I urge you guys to go and check my Twitter out. It's linked in the description. Well, now that I've figured out how I'm going to do this and the fact it's going to work, I'm going to take a guess and say the building's going to get a little bit more streamlined from here on out. I'm planning on getting a heap of progress done in the next couple of episodes. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, you could hit that thumbs up. That's very much appreciated. And I hope to see you guys on the next episode. Take it easy.